And she had been a church organist, a very religious woman, had been a church organist in her spare time, and still played the organ and then the keyboard later on until very close to the end of her life. Well, over the course of the following winter, she slipped and fell on the sidewalk and broke her arm. And the hospital emergency department sent her immediately to this facility for rehabilitation. And what do you think happened to Connie in this environment? You see in the back right corner, there's the television cable. There's nothing in this room to stimulate her. She's away from her cat and she's in pain. So her cognitive impairment became a whole lot worse. And so discharge planning for Connie was to ship her to a nursing home. And nursing homes don't, by and large, allow cats. So this really would have been a very traumatic thing for Connie. Well, her picture had been in that first Globe and Mail spread, and it helped secure a room in a supportive housing facility for seniors with cognitive impairment. So Connie moved into this very special place in Toronto. It's run by Sprint, the community support agency I do a lot of work with. And she was reunited with Oscar, and she spent most of the next 2 years there and enjoyed a very good quality of life. Connie could no longer see sheet music, but she knew so much from memory, and she played flawlessly. And for those of you who have seen House Calls, you've seen Connie play and heard her play. And she was a tough, very tough, very fiercely independent woman. She looks here like a benign grandmother, but believe me, she wasn't. And she came during the Depression from Alberta to Toronto looking for work and worked her whole life. She worked up until the age of 80. And she was an office manager, and she was sort of unceremoniously replaced by a computer, is how she put it. And you see Connie here celebrating her 94th birthday, a year after moving into Ewart Angus, and she really thrived in this supportive environment. And it's not a retirement residence, it's not a long-term care facility, it's simply an apartment building that has personal support workers in there that support the clients that need the care. A very simple but very efficient and cost-effective model. That's Connie giving me a piece of her mind. So just before Christmas, when she was 94 and a half, Connie had a stroke. And you can see that she's really declined. But even though she could hardly walk, she could still play the piano flawlessly. And she played the piano almost every day, even after the stroke. And she told me, I spend a lot of time resting. And over the winter and into the spring, she was getting weaker and weaker and gradually was pretty well bedbound. And she realized that she needed to make a move into long-term care, and she accepted that and arranged to give Oscar to a family member. And she moved to a nursing home, and 2 days before her 95th birthday, she got up, she ate breakfast, she went back to bed, and quietly died. So she had 95 good years. And hopefully the last 2 or 3 of them were greatly enhanced by receiving good supportive home care. And she was buried, she never married, but she was buried next to one of her brothers. Joe is a World War II veteran, and he went off to fight in the Navy. He spent 5 years in the North Atlantic on a sub-chaser, and this was his parents' home, and he left from here, and he came back here after the war and never married, and you know, has lived there his entire life. Spends a lot of time on the front porch, and though Toronto's a huge city, you know, we describe it as a city of neighborhoods, and he lives in East York, in a very Greek part of town, though He's not in the least bit Greek. And you know, he sits on his porch, and often when I go and see him, you know, in the summer, I'll just sit on the porch. We have our little house call on the porch, and every second person who walks by waves and says, "Oh, hi, Joe, how's it going?" And you know, women down the street, when they make a casserole, they make an extra one and bring it to Joe, and he gets really fussed over. And he's a gruff, grumpy, you know, he's like sandpaper. But everybody likes him. So Joe has Parkinson's disease. He has a partial paralysis of one side of his body from a stroke. He has terrible osteoarthritis of the knees and shoulders. He came back from the war and started a small little transportation and moving business. And Joe he worked long hours, total workaholic, and he put all of his money into real estate. He owns 5 houses in Toronto. He owns 2 absolutely prime properties in Muskoka. So on paper, this guy is a multimillionaire. But will he spend money on himself? Absolutely not. He still cooks. He was cooking on this stove until recently. And he bought that stove for his parents in the 1930s. And there's a picture of Joe in the Navy. And that's his mother next to him. And he used to spend a lot of time in his basement workshop. And we went down there one day. He can't really go up and down stairs anymore. He's living all on one level. And a lot of older homes in Toronto, they're 2-story homes, and the washroom's on the 2nd floor. Joe's very lucky. He has a washroom on the main floor because he can't go up to his bedroom, so he sleeps in the living room. So unfortunately, his workshop has just kind of become a storage facility, but it's a treasure trove for people who like to tinker. So here's a man who is, you know, a multimillionaire, and look what he's sleeping on. He's sort of got this pull-out couch from the 1960s, and he complains of back pain, so I would give him prescriptions with, you know, buy a Posturepedic mattress. and he puts those prescriptions into the safe next to his bed, but he doesn't fill them. So his mobility was a big problem. I tried to talk him into getting an electric scooter so he could go down, because he lives just north of the Danforth, and that's a really exciting part of town. That sort of strip of great restaurants, and there's lots of hustle and bustle, and I kept telling him it's a great place to go girl watching. But talked him into getting a walker. So he, for the first time in years, was able to walk on his own sidewalk. You see three generations of East Yorkers using wheeled transportation. So the blessing of this walker was that as his mobility became progressively worse, it allowed him to get around the main floor of his house. Without it, he couldn't get around. Now, Joe's a veteran, so we hooked him up with the Veterans Independence Program. Does anybody know what that is, or are you familiar with it? It's a national home care program operated by Veterans Affairs Canada for veterans. And if you've, like Joe, served in a combat role overseas, you're eligible for the full range of services. And they provide a wide basket of services they contract everything out, but they do the case management and they pay. But they will hook people up with home support services, and they even include yard maintenance, snow shoveling, transportation. And what's really interesting is the cost per veteran per year enrolled in this program is less than $3,000. So wouldn't that make a wonderful model for a national home care program for all Canadians?